right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Year in Review. I'm Martin Foss, and what a year it was. Of course, we're still dealing with COVID throughout 2019, 20, 21, and who knows how long from here on out. Also, Hurricane Ida, which will be in a completely separate year in review. So now we take a look at part one, a three-part series in the next half hour. Here's part one of the year 2021. In January, Louisiana Supreme Court Justice John Weimer was named Chief Justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court.
Upon taking the oath of office, I feel a profound sense of humility and a recognition of the obligation to be of service.
Also in January, tragedy was in the news as two Montague women were killed in a murder-for-hire plot.
January 13, 2021, we had two victims, Ms. Brittany Cormier, 34 years of age, who lived in Montague, and Ms. Hope Nettleton, 37 years of age, who lived in Montague. We were able to make 3 arrests through their investigation, which was Bro Cormier, 35 years old, from Kaplan, Andrew S. Kahn, which is 25 years of age, he's from Karen Crow, and Dalvin Wilson, 22 years of age, from Eunice, Louisiana. Bo hired, basically, Andrew S. Kahn and Dalvin Wilson to murder the rape victims so she cannot testify.
Now on to February, when HTV looked at the ever-growing threat of human trafficking in our area. We interviewed local officials with the Terrebonne Parish District Attorney's Office about this growing threat in the community.
They're coming into smaller areas because they don't think we're able to be prepared. But fortunately, we are prepared under the guidance of Mr. Waits, and we work well with the Sheriff's Office and Houma Police Department.
We also interviewed the director of the documentary Silent Cry about human trafficking.
Some are starting to wake up a little bit more, which is really great. But, you know, unfortunately, I will admit, you're one of the few that are really trying to take this head on, and I really appreciate you for that. Most people want to keep their head buried in the sand on this topic.
In medical news in February, the Cardiovascular Institute of the South held its grand opening of its new ambulatory surgical center in Gray. The facility will allow CIS to perform complex medical procedures outside of a hospital setting.
This state-of-the-art ambulatory surgical center and office-based lab is equipped with the best imaging tools known to man.
Switching to March, heavy rains in northern Terrebonne rose water levels in Little Bayou Black and Bayou Terrebonne. That led to some concerns for some residents.
We not talking hurricane tidal surge, we talking rainwater. And the reason I'm so passionate right now, I just recently renovated that whole house, the complete interior of that house. And right now, when I left to come here, I left out of that house with water on top of the floor still, as we speak.
Also in March, tragedy struck one Houma family. An 8-year-old child was killed by gunfire while sitting in a vehicle in East Houma. Houma police identified the suspect as Devonta Verrett.
During the investigation, it was reported to us that a dark-colored compact sedan was being followed by a light-colored sedan. As this was taking place, it was reported to our officers that several shots were fired, and we gained information that the light-colored sedan fired several shots at the dark-colored compact car, which in fact Trace Bryant, along with her mother and a companion of her mother, was occupying.
For months, Devonta Verrett eluded police and was captured in August in Gulfport, Mississippi. March would also see the start of an effort to reform recreation in Terrebonne Parish. After several discussions and delays, the first reform proposed is to consolidate 4 recreation districts in northern Terrebonne. In the spring of 2022, voters in the new district will head to polls to vote on the new tax for the new recreation district. Voters in all 4 of the affected recreation districts will have to approve the measure, or the districts will stay the same.
We deserve to let the people of the parish of these 4 rec districts vote on it and decide on it. What we're doing tonight is just a step in doing that.
Jumping to April, LumCon broke ground on its new Blue Works campus in East Houma.
This is going to be a unique, the only one of its kind anywhere in terms of all that it's going to do for research and education. Give students a hands-on experience by providing them with the access to technologies that will certainly define the workforce of the future.
Also in April, Houma native Ricky False began his trek on a bicycle from New Orleans to Key West. He would continue his journey and head to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness for homeless veterans. Along the way, HTV interviewed False several times.
Our veterans sleeping in tents, homeless and under bridges, and being delayed and denied their benefits until they pretty much die is unacceptable.
In another April story, the Terrebonne Parish School District made the difficult decision to close Pointe-aux-Chenes Elementary School.
When I left Pointe-aux-Chenes and I went to South Terrebonne, 8th grade, not until that first day there that I realized how isolated I was, socially, mentally, emotionally. I was not prepared. I only could wish that I had been exposed more earlier in life to prepare myself for that transition.
Opponents of the closure wanted to keep the school open to create a French immersion program.
I was already speaking the language, but it wasn't supported in our schools. I sat with the Pointe-aux-Chenes tribe to welcome the program because we would have happily brought our own kids to that school.
Also, tragedy struck again in April. 13 members of the Sea Coral Power were killed following the overturning of a jackup vessel during a violent thunderstorm in the Gulf of Mexico. HTV's Grand Isle camera captured the storm over Grand Isle that headed into the Gulf. 6 of the 19 crew members aboard the vessel were rescued. 6 days after the incident, officials called off the search.
We've had to make the difficult decision to suspend search and rescue efforts at sunset today. Our focus now will begin to shift. We will begin to give our full support to the National Transportation Safety Board that will begin to look into the hows and whys of what happened here.
Later in the year, the United States Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board held a joint hearing in Houma.
This hearing will examine a variety of different topics, including the incident, events leading up to the incident, weather, search and rescue efforts, the condition of the vessel, the owner, the charterer, and the regulatory scheme which applied to the vessel.
When I felt it roll, I jumped up and I grabbed my life jacket because I bring my own life jacket offshore. So I grabbed my life jacket, and while I was going to put it on, the TV and the shelves flew at me off the wall.
It was a complete washing machine. You had the sea state hitting into the side of the Sea Corps vessel.
After I hit the tilt alarm, I noticed the door. So I grabbed the door and we were going over. And that's when I watched Dave. That's when I watched Dave fall.
A full report from the Coast Guard and NTSB is expected in 2022 or maybe even in 2023. In business news in April, Terrebonne General gets a new name. Terrebonne General dropped Medical Center from its name and added Health System. We have more on that story.
We felt that what we have today doesn't describe who we are or what we do. It describes 4 walls in a building. And because of that, we felt that we needed to make a change. We are Terrebonne General Health System. That is who our name will be. That is who we are.
Also in April, a shooting at Lenny's nightclub sent 5 people to the hospital after an incident broke out at the club.
We was able to look at surveillance. It appears the shooter had been firing shots in the ceiling to try to get the crowd dispersed to get out of there.
A month later, 20-year-old Brandon Johnson was arrested in St. Charles Parish for 5 counts of attempted murder. And we'll be right back with the year in review for 2021. Stay tuned. Welcome back as we continue to look at the year 2021. Just reminding all of you that Hurricane Ida is a separate year in review from COVID and other stories in this very horrific year. We now take a look at part 2. Now on to May, when weeks of heavy rains north of Thibodaux caused high water for communities of Shupik and Chack Bay. Residents had to deal with the high water in their yards for several weeks as water had become trapped in the Lake des Allemands basin.
You got back here, in the back here, you got 4 foot of water. Back of my house, you got 3 foot of water.
In medical news in May, the Cardiovascular Institute of the South's Dr. Peter Fail performed a rare bioprosthetic aortic valve replacement at Terrebonne General Health System.
We met this young lady about 10 years ago for her original aortic valve replacement, which was done surgically. That valve had failed, and we had actually put in a TAVR valve. That's a valve in a stent, if you would. We reevaluated her and found out that that valve had failed, and so we had to put a valve inside that valve.
Now on to June, when Terrebonne Parish School Superintendent Philip Martin announced that he will retire at the end of his contract in mid-2022.
I feel very, very fortunate to be able to do something that I enjoy doing for as long as I've been able to do it. So I'm very thankful for that and all the thousands of people that have influenced me along the way. I hope I've had some small influence and impact on some of our kids along the way as well.
In medical news in June, the Cardiovascular Institute of the South brought back its annual New Cardiovascular Horizons Conference in New Orleans after canceling last year's conference due to the pandemic.
This whole educational movement on peripheral vascular disorders is gaining traction and certainly yielding better outcomes, and more people are wanting to learn about it.
Now on to July, when the Louisiana legislature held its first July veto session. The legislature tried to override several bills vetoed by Governor John Bel Edwards. The short 2-day session ended with no vetoes overridden.
I don't think that everybody was happy with the outcome. Some people may have been. Members had to decide whether they were going to hold to their original vote or change their original vote concerning the bill.
Now on to August, when a 60-year-old grandmother was shot while waiting to pick up her grandchild at St. Francis de Sales Cathedral School on Greenwich Street.
We learned that a 60-year-old female was sitting in her vehicle like most parents do to pick up their kids from St. Francis, sitting in a vehicle. She was approached by a male subject. The male opened the door of her vehicle, attempted to grab some property of hers. A little altercation ensued, and the male fired a shot, striking the victim in her lower torso.
Houma police arrested 17-year-old Jermaine Dodge for attempted second-degree murder and possessing a firearm in a school zone after police received a tip leading to this location. Also in August, an altercation between several men turned into a shootout at the BP gas station on Tunnel Boulevard.
2 cars of individuals were involved in an altercation, which led to the death of Sequoia Williams. Mr. Williams exited the vehicle. He was in fact armed with a weapon. He started what we refer to as pistol whipping another gentleman with the weapon. They ended up on the ground. Mr. Williams was on top of him still, you know, hitting him with the firearm, and another gentleman emerged from a pickup truck. The other individual fired shots, which caused the death of Mr. Williams.
Then another big story of 2021, as if COVID wasn't enough. Hurricane Ida cut through South Louisiana like a buzzsaw, with winds over 150 miles per hour in late August. Hurricane Ida's winds left untold devastation in our area. Many residents are still working on recovering from this storm. We will have more on Hurricane Ida in a separate year in review show, where we will recap Hurricane Ida and the issues still affecting our area. Now on to September, as sadness struck the Houma Police Department. Houma Police Officer Austin Bush was killed in a single vehicle crash in Thibodeau. Family and friends gathered to remember the fallen officer.
So young, innocent, pure. He lived out his dream. His dream was to be a police officer. He fulfilled that dream.
Then in October, a Tennessee man was fatally shot by a Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's deputy following a struggle for the deputy's taser.
Our officers responded to the intersection of Canal Street and Bond Street in reference to an officer-involved shooting. One SO deputy sustained some injuries from the shooting, as well as the suspect.
Now on to November, as another officer-involved shooting was investigated. This time, a Houma police officer shot a man in East Houma.
Houma Police Department, they responded to a disturbance call on downtown Court, which is just on the east side, not far. Upon arrival, there was an officer. He met with a subject that was later identified as Johnny McGee, 36 years old, from Houma. As soon as the officer pulled up, McGee got out of the vehicle and started to charge towards an officer with a screwdriver in his hand. McGee did not listen. The officer did fire his service weapon, striking McGee.
Also, in November, some good news on the levee front, as officials broke ground on the new Bubba Dove Lock Complex. The over $420 million project will convert the existing floodgate into a lock.
This is tremendous, and it's going to add so much more protection to a system that performed better than anybody thought it could when Ida came ashore. You know, there was not a single failure anywhere. There was no overtopping anywhere, and this is going to add to that level of protection, and it's a very generous investment.
Also, the Grand Bayou floodgate was dedicated to former state representative Reggie Bagala, who died of COVID in 2020.
Reggie ran, one of the major reasons was so that he could protect and fight to protect his bayou, his beloved people, because he wanted to make sure he could ensure a place for all of our children to live and our future grandchildren to live.
Also, tragedy was in the news in November, as several fatal crashes were reported in the Troop C area, including one crash that claimed 4 lives on Thanksgiving Day.
They were trying to make a left turn on the Highway 90. Unfortunately, they were T-boned by a truck that was heading westbound, and in that crash, they had 2 occupants inside the car that was making a left. They were killed. They also had 2 other occupants in the truck that was on US 90 heading westbound. They were killed.
Now on to December, when the LA1 project gets good news. The Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development accepted a $460 million bid for the next phase of the Louisiana 1 project to connect the existing bridge to the 4-lane in Golden Meadow.
To finally have this next phase, phase 2, to get elevated LA1 inside the levee system in Golden Meadow is really a huge milestone.
In medical news in December, Thibodeau Regional Health Systems opened its new $60 million cancer center.
It's one thing to develop a plan and have a vision. It's another thing to execute it and make it reality. Having these great people have great processes, have strong leaders at every level, enables us to make things like this reality.
And when we come back, we'll take a look on our next segment at COVID in this year. Remember, COVID has been with us for several years now, We'll take a look at some of the things that took place with COVID in the year 2021. It's all next. Welcome back to the year in review for COVID now. COVID has been with us for several years now. It's really here to stay. It's been on our minds, it's been on everybody's news tables, and it's been everywhere. Let's take a look at some of the things we shared with you in the year 2021. In early January, COVID cases in the Bayou area were growing, but efforts to roll out the vaccine to the elderly population were increasing. High numbers of cases continued into February, but began to drop as the month ended. In early March, Governor John Bel Edwards moved the state back to Phase 3 reopening. The governor also announced that more individuals would be eligible for the vaccine as supplies became more readily available. Terrebonne General also sprang into gear and opened up a drive-through vaccination center at the Civic Center.
We are doing as much as we can as Terrebonne General to support our community and all of our region and in the tri-parish areas.
Also, as positive case counts continued to decline, the state eased restrictions on face masks and capacity limits. Then in July, the Delta variant caused case counts to rise. As case counts rose and hospitalizations continued to increase, and hospitals started becoming concerned.
When you hear what's going on, not just in our region, this is not just a Bayou region problem. And that's what I think people may or may not understand. If you watch New Orleans, has no bed capacity. Lafayette area, Acadiana area, has no bed capacity. Baton Rouge has no bed capacity. Shreveport, Alexandria, us, there isn't bed capacity to be able to transfer people out.
Case counts continued to stay high throughout August, but then came a shock to the local medical community as Hurricane Ida devastated several area medical facilities.
Without having a hospital, and again I want to put Shawbear and St. Anne, Lady of the Sea, they all went down, and they went down before, you know, we did. We felt our building was extraordinarily strong, but so did everybody, right? Yeah. St. Charles, so you lost total health care in our community.
After the storm, COVID cases continued to fall in October. By the end of October, Governor John Bel Edwards lifted the indoor mask mandate. Then in November, case counts continued to fall. But by December, cases had started to increase and a new variant had emerged. The Omicron variant is currently spreading, and the governor has reinstated some of the mask mandates for state workers. There you have it, the year in review for 2021. You might have asked yourself, where was Hurricane Ida? Hurricane Ida is a separate year in review package. You can catch it on HTV in the different segments and also watch it in its entirety. We sort of abbreviated it, but you can see it's a 4-hour segment we put together, and it'll be on Facebook and YouTube under the Hurricane Ida Year in Review. I'm Martin Foss. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you around the corner on other programming.